Okay, welcome everybody to our, once again, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, April 16th at 4 p.m. City Hall Council Chambers. I'd like to recognize that we are doing our business today on the traditional unceded territory of the Hupatchisitt and Sechot First Nation. We have a motion that the agenda be approved and as circulated, please.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We also have the minutes of the last Committee of the Whole meeting held at 6 p.m. on December 19th, 2017. A motion to adopt those minutes, Council.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Council, our first item is a delegation from the Alberni Valley Social Planning Council. Mr. Ron Jorgensen. Mr. Jorgensen, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I'd like to do, first of all, is just hand out to the councilors some material that is relevant to the slide presentation that's here today. And it's not information that you need to fast read, but that you can reflect on afterwards. I apologize for not getting this to Alicia earlier, but for a short time on request.
I can't read it in there. Okay, thank you.
So the material that you have in front of you covers the slide presentation that I'm going to use today, and it also the other material that's there are examples of various social planning councils and commissions that have arisen in other communities across BC. And there's a variety of them that are there in terms of communities like Burnaby and Mission, but also North Okanagan, Williams Lake. So communities that are of a similar size to Port Alberni, but also some that are larger, but it does give you background of information about the kinds of things that social planning councils do. And that's the effective reason that I'm here today, is to talk to you about social planning councils. One in the center, Alicia? Okay. Oh, excuse me, is the one in the center, okay. You're gonna do that? All right. Yeah. Okay, so just the agenda is just looking at a community in terms of its social issues, talking a little bit about the social planning council, what social planning councils can be and can do, what the purpose is of a social planning council in developing a social plan, and looking at a plan that has a longitudinal vision, not something that is there to meet the short term, but something that's there to guide us over the long term. We have a number of things that I've talked to you before about in December, and that were brought forward some time ago to the mayor and to Scott, and formed the basis of his report to you from back in February of 2016. These are points that you've already heard about, so I'm not going to spend time on them, but I was just there to refresh your memory of the discussions that we'd had earlier. So there's 10 points that you'll see there in those first two slides, and basically what they're doing is guiding your thinking in terms of what a social planning council can be. Moving on to taking a glimpse at history, one of the things that I know you're all aware of, but I want to bring it back into context again, and that is that when we look back on Port Alberni in the late 70s, 80s, we had a community that worked hard and played hard. And we had a huge resource base here that made sure that facilities were here that were going to look after their workers and look after their kids. There was probably an undervaluing of education, and I say that only in the context of people didn't need an education because they could go down and go to work in a mill and earn as much money as anybody that was standing up in the education institution teaching them. So there was a lot of economic dependency that built out of that, both in terms of income coming into families and also in terms of you as a municipality, or us as a municipality, in terms of revenue and revenue base. We had abundant resources, and we saw it back then, and we still see it as a spin-offs today when we look at the arena and we look at some of the fields and resources and so on that are here that have come out of the contributions that the resource base made for us. And at the same time, it was very much a top-down controlled situation. Resource and mills and the whole operation that was going on here in the valley was about making money. And it was about what can we get by with in terms of the most from the contribution that people make and the most that we can put into the pockets of our shareholders at the end of the day. So unionism ended up springing up in that setting as a struggle to try and establish the rights of workers and the rights and safety of people in the workplace, but it was very much a man's world. So over against that, we look at it where we are now in 2018, and we've got a lot of disrupted families, a lot of violence, a lot of early teen pregnancy, a lot of sexual abuse, a lot that's hidden down below, and we look at the drugs and drug culture that's here in our community, and of course it was spoken to in December by Corporal Hunter when he came in to address you. And what I want you to keep in mind is that some of these problems are here now because of what happened back then. I want that to sink in, and I want you to appreciate that we got a lot out of the unions, but we also got a lot of disruption in our community as a result of it. And that's what we're making our way out of today. And I know there's a big struggle in terms of the municipal government in terms of looking where are we going to get our finances and how are we going to keep our infrastructure in place. And we've got an aging infrastructure that's here that has to do with plumbing and sewage and housing and buildings and all kinds of things that we're struggling to try and bring back into place. And a lot of those issues land on your plate, and you have to respond to it right away. And what I'm bringing to you when I talk about a social planning council is an assist to you, because I don't think you can do it all. I don't think any of us can do it all. I think it requires a multitude of effort that's been here, and there's been a huge contribution in this community, as I spoke to before, with respect to volunteers and volunteerism. The groups in this community and the amount of contribution that they make is incredible. And in some ways, we have not really measured what that is. We just accepted the fact that it's our saving grace. It's holding and catching a whole lot of people who are falling through the cracks, and a lot of them are coming out of those disrupted families and the abuse that was aroused at that time. We've got our students leaving the community because we don't have the distribution of jobs and education that will be able to hold them here in terms of technology. And the reality is that we're losing some of our best minds as they go away for education, and many of them take a long time before they come back. And it's not that they don't come back, it's that we lose a lot of their valuable contributions because we don't have the resources here to hold them and to give them the opportunities to work. The result of that is, as I mentioned, that we've got a limited tax base to draw on. And that's a struggle that's not going to solve itself overnight. It's something that I know you work on every time you come together. The other thing that we've got that we're facing with right now are the changing patterns. We have an opportunity at this point to do something different. And I think that's what council is really faced with when we start to look at the Social Planning Commission, is a chance to do something that's different. Now, it's not that different, as you will note when you look at some of the examples that are there and some of the other communities and what they're doing, but it's new for this community. And one of the challenges that I think this council faces is being willing to try some things that are new. And as I say that, I can look around and look in our community and see some of the things that are happening in housing and some of the things that have happened with the needle exchange and some of the dynamics that are going on in some of the other arenas in our community, and say, yes, we do some things here that are new and lead in terms of what's going on the island and in BC. But I think the whole idea of looking at social development and the social structure is something that is challenging for us and something that we have an opportunity to step into and approach it in a little different way, rather than leaving the sort of fragmented response that takes place out in our communities as agencies are struggling to try to find the dollars to provide a coherent social service support system and fill in the gaps that are there within our community. And it's not any of us that sit around this table right now that aren't aware of those gaps and don't probably lose sleep on some occasions, recognizing that I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to deal with it. And we've got so much else on the plate that I don't know how we're even going to get there. So that's what I'm offering to you as a suggestion, is that you take a good, strong look at the Social Planning Commission as a tool to provide you some additional information, additional bodies, and additional expertise that's out in the community. Because I will say that one of the things that is so idyllic about this community is the fact that at the size that it is right now, everybody knows everybody. And so as a result, there's an opportunity for some cohesiveness that a lot of larger communities don't get, because people don't know each other as well. So this little piece here in terms of the wave and the particle, I threw this in here. Well, I was going to tell you this joke about the guy who walked into the bar and ordered 3 drinks, but I thought, no, that's probably not appropriate here for. So I came back to this little drawing here. And what I want to bring home is this notion that the things that hit us and that hit you as a municipality are the sudden needs that come up. And they're like those drops that drop into the water. But when we talk about the social structure in this community, we're in that wave that goes out. And it affects everybody in this community, not just any one person that happens to be involved. Everybody gets impacted by it. And so we've got a municipality that is part of a government structure, and we know that government structure is vertical. We know that it's top down. And at the same time, we've got this horizontal impact in our community that spreads out, involves everyone from the homeless person that's down on the street to our First Nations relations that are on the reserves and in our community here, as well as newcomers that are coming in, and as well as old people who have been here for generations. So they're all caught in these ripples as they go out. And that's the area that I want us to think about when we start looking at a social planning commission, is something that's going to follow those waves out and look at how can we help people and support people as they get caught in the waves and changes of time. And we are in a changing time right now. We've got, whether we talk about women's issues, whether we talk about reconciliation, whether we talk about the government, whether we talk about the ecological factors or climate change, there's tremendous forces that are at work right now that you or I are not going to be able to impact. What we can do, though, is try and support each other and support ourselves within this community as that wind of change takes place and moves through. And that, again, is where we come back to looking at the role of the Social Planning Council. So in terms of observations, I've mentioned already that structures inside municipal governments as well as provincial and federal are pretty hierarchical, and they tend to be focused on outcomes, and they look at cost benefits, and they want to look at what's going on in different areas and how can we draw on those experiences and bring them in and implement them in our community. And that's understandable because you've got a lot on your plate. But where I want to go is into this next part, which is looking at the Social Development Commission, which I think has a little different set of needs that are related to it. It's about inclusivity. It's about acknowledging the diversity in our community. It's about focusing on the relationships that we have, and some of these are very long-term relationships with our First Nations relations and with the regional districts and with the West Coast and so on. Those are pretty extensive. But we need to give a voice to all the different sectors, and we don't always do that. I would say that if we look around the table right now, and I include myself in this group, we all sit here as middle class to upper class in terms of where we are with respect to our incomes and our families and so on. And there are whole groups in this community that aren't represented here in this room. And what I would like to encourage is that through the Social Planning Commission, they take the steps to reach out and reach down and reach to the sides and pick up those places and those voices that we're not hearing and bring them to the table. It's about building interdependence. There isn't anybody, I don't think, that's out there that doesn't want to be in the community. If they didn't want to be in the community, they'd have gone. And even our homeless, or our street people, or our single parents, they stay here, and you can say it's because we've got low income, but I'm saying it's more than that. I'm saying that there's something in this valley that's attractive and interesting, and people deserve an opportunity to be able to enjoy the place in which they live. And some of them are not. So it's about geographic inclusion, and within the city itself, it's about not just looking at expanding out and developing new areas, but it's also about rebuilding and beautifying and making more inclusive some of the other areas in our town that are struggling right now. And I know that that's on the agenda of the municipality. It's not something that's new, but I see the Social Planning Council as a tool to helping that process and helping to bring information to council so that they can respond to these things more effectively. Going over a couple of slides, and you can go glance back. This is basically just some general ideas, and they don't amount to anything other than things to stir your thinking a little. But I want to focus in here in terms of Social Planning Council. And again, these are not points that are new, but they summarize, again, some of those 10 points that we had back at the beginning. And one of them is to provide an umbrella organization that leads social change. We've got so many groups in our community that are all struggling to do a job, but often are not working together. And that's not through any fault of theirs, because most of it's volunteer time. And so part of it is providing a social development plan for Port Alberni that has a longitudinal vision. And when I talk about a longitudinal vision, I'm thinking back to years back. We actually sat down, we went through a 2020 vision process. And when that happened, I think a lot of people went, oh, this is great. But it kind of died on the vine. And it's not that we haven't struggled to try and bring some of those things along, whether it's helping the waterfront or whether it's trying to diversify in some of the other areas in our community. It's that we've lost track of a lot of the things that were in that 2020 vision. And we need to come back to that kind of thinking so that we can guide ourselves forward on the social plane. It's also, the Social Planning Commission has the potential of searching out the funds around social issues and beginning to bring that home so that we can support the on-the-ground initiatives that are already here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we need to be able to facilitate connecting these organizations with those funds. And we also need to look at how do we provide that continuum of social support across our whole community, where everyone is getting some part of the benefits. The other two things are more collecting, gathering, developing a directory of agencies and services in Port Alberni, and that's largely done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel again. It's all there, but it's coordinating that and bringing that together and having someone responsible for keeping that built up and in place. And the second is providing a library of reports and documents that feed and enrich the information that council has. And we've got all kinds of reports that run from the health area to the social service area to the homeless and all the different issues that you can possibly imagine. So, but we don't necessarily have them in one place. They're spread out through the community. And the other piece, which I think is most important, is to monitor the progress of what's happening in the social realm and to bring that information back to council in a concise form and in terms of recommendations that council can act on. Where they need the opportunity to have more information, there's an opportunity like you're providing today where people can bring that information forward, the Social Planning Commission can bring it forward and make it available to the council. But the key for me is, and I think for the people that I represent in terms of the Social Planning Commission or Council that I'm speaking on behalf of, is to see this emerge as a commission, to see this emerge as something that is going to survive administrations and continue to keep the vision of the social life and social plan for Port Alberni moving forward. Even as administrations change, we don't lose track of that particular piece. The last couple of pages that are there, these pages in here, those are descriptions that essentially come from a variety of different communities. And they're their mission statements with respect to their social planning commissions or councils. They're not anything that this council has to look at and say, we want that one. But I throw them in here just as, again, a guide to your thinking to reflect on the possibilities of where we can go with this process. The second document that I put on your table there is a list of the different communities and is a little more extensive in terms of not just the mission statement, but also in terms of looking at some of the actual mechanics of how things are done there. And there are some additional materials that I'm certainly prepared to hand over to Scott or to whomever is appropriate with respect to further information from some of these organizations. I highlighted one of the communities a while back when I was speaking in December, and I want to come back to that, and that's with Cowichan. And the reason I bring Cowichan up is because one of the things they did, and I think you'll probably recall me speaking to it, was that they took and they evaluated what it was that the volunteer organizations brought to the community in terms of dollars and funding, in terms of volunteers, in terms of hours, and the amount of jobs and so on that they provided. And they actually found that they had more money coming in through their agencies and organizations than they did through their municipal government. So they were doubling it. And I think that we have an important responsibility to be able to see and recognize that contribution that's made here in this community, because I think it's there. But I think that's something that the Social Planning Commission would take on. The other piece that comes out of Cowichan, which is interesting, is just looking at a living wage. And one of the things that's really important is that they're noting that from 2014 to 2017, the living wage has increased 12%, while the actual on-the-ground wage has increased 6%. So that means everybody's growing into poverty. And some of that's not new information, I'm sure, to you, and you probably see it here in your own community as well. But certainly one of the things that I think is important is helping to broaden the information of this kind out into the community, so that the community, in fact, is aware and can step in and support where it can, and to help to move things forward. So I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come today and to speak to you. And certainly I'm open to responding to any of your questions. There are several other people here from the Social Planning Council, and there are several other people from various parts of the community, which I know are more than willing to share their expertise.
Great, thank you. Bit of a speakers list here, Councillor Sauvé, then Councillor Paulson.
Thank you. Thank you for the informative presentation, Ron. Being part of nonprofit and volunteering in the community, I see that we're lacking a lot of volunteers. And I don't think it's based on the fact that they're not out there. It's just we don't have this central hub that I always thought that we need to create, a one-place stop for volunteers to be able to go to there and find out what is available within our community and what meets their needs. I just wanted to address that because I think it's one thing we're lacking in the community. You know, we got an NEO for jobs and so forth, but it'd just be nice to have this certain agency that's there and it's purely for volunteers and all the options available for them and everything could be done there. Because I know the volunteers are out there. I hear it every day. I hear about it every day, but it's just we're just so drawn thin. And but the second comment I wanted to make is this social planning commission. There's one thing about this community is we got a lot of committees in respect to certain groups, homelessness, and so forth. As you are well aware, we got a lot of committees. How big of a social planning commission do you envision? And would it be gender and age balance and so forth? You know, I need a voice for the youth that we desperately need in the community. We need a voice for the seniors, but we need also a voice for all these nonprofit organizations. How big of a commission? It's a big task. It's a needed task that we need for our community, but how big do you see it being?
In a nutshell, I don't see it. I don't see it in terms of defining it as a number. I think it's something that has to emerge out of our collective wisdom. I have a perception. I know that I'm certainly not alone in terms of seeing the social needs in this community and having to wrestle with how do we approach it. So I'm not going to go there. I think there are guidelines that the municipality has with respect to committees and commissions and strategies for how people get to that. I think there is a responsibility to make sure that we keep the diversity in our community represented, whether it's in terms of that commission reaching out and connecting with those groups, or whether it's about bringing those groups in on the commission. I think there are different strategies.
Getting these groups to work together.
Yeah.
It's a
Yes,
big issue.
there's very definitely a responsibility for coordinating issues and direction for the community.
Councillor Paulson.
Thanks, Ron. That's great reporting. And I guess my question is we've seen various incarnations, although we've never had a formal social planning council per se, but we've had other incarnations and groups working together and trying to pull this together. And we've seen some of those groups succeed or fail. I guess my question to you and your vision, and maybe some of the other people in the audience might speak to this, is what do you see would be the glue? And I realize you're only as good as your leadership in councils and those sorts of things. What do you see would be the glue or the attractant to make sure that everybody participated? So you have a united voice, whether it be applications for funding or those sorts of things. So it's a pretty philosophical question, I guess, but we need a way to make sure and ensure that this succeeds. And what do you see as the glue that can pull this together? And we could hear from some of the other participants in the room as well.
I think that's a very challenging question, and I'm not sure that, again, any answer that I can give or anyone else here can give can assure you that what you'll get will satisfy the need. And I think that's part of the challenge that sits in front of this council now. We're at a time for change. We don't know exactly how to move forward, but we do have wisdom and we do have leadership in this community. How we tap into that and how we bring that forward into the Social Planning Commission, I think that's a piece we need to struggle with. But in terms of who that is or what the characteristics of that particular person would be, I just have one comment to make with respect to that. but it certainly wouldn't be the answer. I certainly open it up to anybody else that's here who wants to speak to that issue.
Because I know as a counselor,
Mhm.
I see fires all over the place. We've got homeless, we've got low-income housing, we've got women's services, and it's like it's a fire all over the place. And as a counselor, to me, actually, it gets quite confusing, especially when it comes to prioritizing and stuff. And I see that a council would be really beneficial, at least to me, for that kind of feedback and information, because we got a whole pile of fires in our community, and we're not alone in this community.
Yeah.
And to get a true voice, and I totally agree with Ron,
Yeah.
but to get a true voice, I really don't want to see political influence. I really would like to see a true representation of our community without any political influence. And that's how you're going to get the real answers, and that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to achieve with this.
Well, I think there has to be, I mean, that's about relationship. And I think that relationship is what we make it. The challenge for us is to make it as mature as possible, and in doing that, to make sure that we're reaching out in as many directions as possible and bringing the best insights forward. And of course, that's what you're looking for as counselors is, do I have the right information to make the right decision and come up with the answer for tomorrow? And my feeling is that if we have a group of people that are sitting down who are coming at it from a social consciousness point of view, not a political, let's get the job done, cost analysis, infrastructure. Those things are here, they're realities, and you have to be dealt with, but that's what you're dealing with most of the time. What I'm looking at is, how do we deal with this wave that's carrying us forward into the future that affects everybody, from our First Nations relations to our homeless, to our single moms, to our newcomers coming into the community. How do we work with that process? And I think we need a group of people who are sitting down and wrestling with it and coming up with a plan that takes us forward. If we don't decide that we're going to New York or to Montreal, if we want to stay in Canada, if we don't decide that, we'll just wander around the island. But if we set a destination, then we have the possibility of getting there. It may take us a long time, and we may have to change different vehicles on the way, but we'll get there if we know where it is we're going. And that's what I see with a social planning commission. It's a commission that sets a goal and sets a vision in front of the community and the council, and then engineers and moves forward with executing that plan over a long period of time. It's not a 10-year or 5-year or 10-year type of thing. This is a 20-year piece that we're looking at a minimum. Yeah.
Councillor McClement is the next person to speak, and then Councillor Minions.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, do you want to keep hearing from us councillors, or are we looking for?
You've things you want to say, and we're all
Okay.
part of it, and so
All right.
let's get out what you want to say, and there may be other people that
Yeah,
want
you
to
might
step
not
forward
like
as
that.
well.
I'm not convinced that a social planning council is what we're looking for. I didn't hear anything in the presentation that convinced me, and maybe someone here in the audience could convince me. The problems we see, you're not changing anything. I don't need to be told the problems. Maybe pointed out some specific ones would be good and on occasion, I'm sure, but they're there. We had years ago a lot of groups in town wanting to do things, and we formed a society which I can never remember the name of, even though I was on it for a long time. Patty Edwards was kind of in charge of it for the MLA and the city, and it went very well for a fair period of time. So I guess what I need to be is a couple of things. I need to be convinced that this is something the city should make a priority, when to me it looks, and this is my opinion, it looks like it's just a lot of people together talking. Not coming to conclusions, not really coming to a destination, but talking. And I've seen this in this town. I've been here a long time. I wasn't born here, but I've been here a long time, been on council a long time, and I've seen a lot of these things. And I can't be convinced, at least I can be convincing, someone can show me, but at this moment I'm not convinced. And another question I have specifically for you, you tell me that I'm in a group that has a middle-class income. How much is that?
How much is that? That's
Yeah.
a good question.
Now, I think so
That's a good
too, because I'm pretty sure I'm in the low-class income.
Okay, could be, yeah.
So I just don't like being categorized like that.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
You know, it seems to me that you're categorizing yourself as something, I don't know what, you know, and I'm not being saying that facetiously,
Yeah.
but when someone tells me that, I'm thinking he's decided that I am this evil person or this bad class of people. And I just want to know how much I got to make to get out of that.
Yeah, I hear that, and I've dropped back into where you are, so I recognize that, you know, and that's because I was earning a pretty good income, but I'm not now. Yeah, and there's many times that I struggle. I'd like to just retire, but I can't afford to just retire. So whatever I've said there, I certainly hasn't been in terms of wanting to denigrate in any way or to categorize you. I do recognize that where you are is in a position of influence. And influence comes with work, it comes with understanding, it comes with wisdom. I don't deny any of that. What I am concerned about is what you focus on and what's out there that needs focusing on. And I know that as a council, you can't focus on everything that's out there. There's just too much of it. And when you talk about a committee that was operating before and that was bringing people together, a social planning commission doesn't have to be different than that. But it happened in a particular environment at a particular state of time. And we're not in that state of time now. And we're not back at that particular place of leadership that's happening. So if council doesn't initiate and bring the leadership forward in this community to take on this social issue, it will continue to bubble around, and we'll have various people doing various things all along. And it's not that they don't do good things. They help seniors. Well, you know what people in this community do. I don't have to tell you that. But the reality is that it's all going in different directions. Some are going to Montreal, but some are going to Whitehorse. And some of them are going to California. And some of them are heading out to the Pacific to fish. And the reality is that we've got a very dispersed community in terms of its destinations. And so somehow council doesn't have to, but it certainly would be a welcome piece if it stimulated the leadership to move us in a direction, a positive direction. And as I say, I'm not saying that to convince you. The logic of it, from my point of view, speaks to it.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Minions?
Thank you. I think the challenges that we face in our community, while we can debate the details of the best way to move forward, I think the challenges are very clear, and we all have a grasp of what's going on, and we want to move forward with something. I'd really like to see us put the same value on our social issues and the same onus to move forward on them as we do on infrastructure renewal and our protective services and everything else that we do as a community. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to say that the social issues all fall more under the provincial government's realm. But I think it's something that is going to take a more local body to lead and move forward on. So I think that a social planning commission where we have a formal relationship and a formal body to task or to look to for advice is a great way to move forward. As a council of 7, I think we often sometimes can feel like we're experts on everything, but I think we need to remember that we can't be experts on everything, and this is maybe an area that we all don't have as much expertise as we might need. So this is a great way to engage the expertise that is out there in our community and the people who are already putting their time in, and just formalize it a bit more. So that's how I see it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Alberni, then Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for your presentation. It was really good. I do think think this is something that the community needs. It's, you know, we're not here to debate it, but just for more for information. So my question, I think, just to speak to your experience on the council, on the social planning council, would you see a commission sort of bringing things from the bottom up more than working on direction from council, or is that kind of a relationship that would work over time, to see how that would work out? Just to see how it would work, do you think, as an organization?
I think in any relationship there needs to be dialogue, and that means back and forth. So I think there's an important role for council to play in saying, we need information on this. And there's also an important role to say, this is information we've gathered, we want you to be aware of this. And so I think there's an opportunity for recommendations to go up, but there's also an opportunity for direction to come down. Frankly, not necessarily in terms of this particular council, but when the Social Planning Council began its roots back at the beginning, it very deliberately kept itself at arm's length because it did not want to be tied to the political will of the council of the day. And so we've got a different world that we're sitting in right now, and a different climate. And we're feeling a need to bring those social issues closer to where the political will and the political possibility for change is there. And frankly, if we, from my perspective, if we continue to leave the responsibility of the social welfare of our community in the hands of the provincial government, we will continue to suffer and increase in suffering, and we'll move into further poverty.
Yeah.
So it has to happen here in the community, and it does become a ground-up situation, and council helps to bridge that process.
Yeah, I agree. It's you know, we're dealing with a situation where we've been downloaded on for so long that we're trying to catch up now to try to deal with that responsibility. I think too, you know, back to the work of the Alberni Valley Community Stakeholders Initiative to End Homelessness with Patty Edwards and the group there. It's been it's too bad I'm not on the committee anymore. It was a great committee. It still is. And what I'd like to see, I know that the committee brought forward recommendations a couple of years ago for a social planning coordinator to be created, a position created here at the city. So I see this as a logical first step as well, to be able to inform that kind of a process, to try to determine what kind of capacity the city needs in order to address the issues, or address social issues in town.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess, Ron, is the hope to be able to bring all the groups that are doing the good things in our community together so there's no duplication, so we can work as one cohesive unit for our community? Is that what we're looking for? Or?
I think there's duplication, but I also think that there's, as I say, a diverse number of expressions of how we go about doing things, and as a result, there's fragmentation.
Yeah, because the funding's not intimate, or it's not indefinite. It'd be easier to achieve with cohesion.
That's right. I think one of the real classic issues that we're looking at right now is the whole issue around the food hub, and the idea that there's a place to which a whole variety of different groups can come to gather and get the things that they need, and that the people who are in need in the community know that that place exists. And there's a lot of different organizations that are interested in food, and we do have a disbursement system that works to some degree at this point. But could we make it more efficient? That's, yeah.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the issue of the Social Planning Council? Well, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I was going to say that I agreed in part with Councillor McClellan, but you might go into shock. So, one question, if I understood properly, is earlier on you mentioned that unions did a lot of good for the community in the past, and that they also created some disruption, and then I took that as that they were responsible for what we're facing today. Fair enough, I'm a union person, always will be, but I recognize that no group is important. So my question is, could you expand on that just a little, but more importantly, what do you think the unions, who are the people, the working people, what is their role in this whole issue we're discussing this afternoon?
That's an interesting question. I worked in the school system for 15 years here. One of the things that I am aware of is that this is one of the most combative school districts in the whole of the province. Now, part of that comes because we are a union-driven community. We've grown up with resources on the island here. Unionism had its roots, and this is a very union-conscious community. And it's fought hard to make sure that the rights of individuals have grown and that they have some wealth and prosperity to share, as well as the owners of the companies that are there. At the same time, when I came into this district 15 years ago, or 20 years ago now, but it started in the education system, we were living in a community in which 20% of the people were First Nations. There was not one teacher who was First Nations in the schools. There was not one administrator that was here in the schools. And so when I challenged the union around that possibility, they weren't prepared to move forward on it. And so I ended up becoming a social justice person on the union so that I could make it an issue. And so I brought it forward as an issue, and we sat down with the administration here in the school district and we talked about it. And I remember Eileen Haggard, whose husband, of course, was very much a union person, walked out of about the third meeting that we had. She said, "I'm listening to the same damn thing all over again. This isn't going to go anywhere." But what did happen was that within a year and a half, the school board made a decision to hire 5 First Nations teachers, to make it a priority. That happened at an administrative level. The school board made that decision. And today we've got an increasing number of First Nations teachers in the area, and we've got administrators who are First Nations as well in the area. And so the union helped that to happen. That was a positive piece. But it hadn't up to that point. And I'm not saying that unions can't do good. I'm just saying that unions have fought so hard for so long that sometimes they are locked into the fight in a certain direction and don't know how to get turned around. And at the same time, I've worked with individuals who have been in the unions here in this community, and I've seen a tremendous amount of harassment and bullying and a lack of support for their union brothers and sisters. And I'm saying specifically union brothers and sisters because as women working into the union, it's a struggle. And I'm not saying the union hasn't changed. I'm saying the union has been tough at changing.
You're talking about the union as if they're a body of people controlling a larger group. It's just like city council. If the people in the municipality don't take part in the process, then don't complain about what the decision-making process is.
No, and I'm not complaining about it. I'm
So
saying
my question was, the school district, it's a school board that hires the people,
Yeah.
not the unions. So that resolved it in a positive way. My question was, what do you see as them being a partner in resolving the problem? What do you see? What do you want to see from them?
I think they're participants in the process.
Well,
because
do you
they're
think they should be included in the process?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
What would you say to them, and what would you say you would like to see change to
Not
help?
what would I like to see changed, what would you like to see changed?
No,
What would you like to see changed for your brothers and your sisters
I know
that
what
you
I
work
like.
with every day in the
I
mill.
worked for 50, 40 years
Yeah.
making changes, and I can reflect on areas where my changes are still intact, along with a lot of other people.
Right.
We're talking about the process today. If you think they were a detriment in some respects in the past, what would you want to say to the unions today to say, look, this will help us get out of this situation that we're facing in Port Alberni?
Well, the first thing I would be doing is inviting them to be participants in the commission or in the speaking to the commission to bring the issues forward that union people are aware of. Because I think because they are members of the community, they play a very significant role, and they have the potential for influencing what happens and how it happens. And so to go ahead and create something and not involve their voices would be an error of judgment from my point of view.
Right. Because social injustices within any group of people is wrong, and you refer to that one. But one reason the economy in Port Alberni is maintained is because the people that work hard and contribute, we're making enough money to contribute to a pension plan, are sustaining this economy to a large extent. But I'm glad that what I did want to hear was that they would be included, would be part of the process. And nothing was ever done right all the time, but everyone, so we have to go past that and look to what lays ahead.
Absolutely.
So I would hate to see them excluded.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to correct something, I started working in the school district in 1979, and we had a First Nations person working for the school district then, and she continued to work until her retirement, which would have been, 2005, 2006. And she retired. Yeah, and still lives in the community. And her husband was an administrator in the community. And, we had a number of First Nations teachers in the community over the years in various schools, various places, various communities.
I certainly wouldn't object to that correction. I just know that in 1998, when I arrived here, there weren't.
Oh, she was still working in the community.
She was there. No one brought that to my attention.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address council or address this topic? Please come forward.
Hi, Celia Stocker-Lisney. And I just have a question for Councillor McClellan. Do you think that there are many different groups within the community working for the same people? Volunteer groups and non-government organizations?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe in different areas, but some of the same people would definitely be involved in some of the groups, yeah.
Do you think they need any sort of coordination or communication between them? Is it difficult for you to do your job in finding which are the right people to grant money to or attend to in your position?
Yeah, they definitely need to be coordinated, and when coming to a group like council, but not just council, the provincial and federal governments, the more unified voice, the better. My fear was, that's why I'm looking for someone to convince me from the audience here. My fear is that if we form a social planning council, I believe we're calling it, it would evolve or devolve into discussion and it wouldn't be getting together like we should. Now, I could be wrong and I can be shown different, and I'd appreciate that.
My last question is just, do you have an alternative idea?
What, to a social planning?
Mm-hmm.
Not directly. I liked what we had before, and it seems to have not be functioning at the moment. And maybe, I guess what I'm hearing here is a top-down from council to the social planning. And I would rather see the groups being together, last time the council and the MLA facilitated that, and I was on that council. In fact, I was on that group for quite some time as an alternate and then as a regular. And that's what I would like to see happen, is all the groups in town who are doing the good work, and we're hearing from quite a few at the moment that have got ideas for getting provincial or federal money, and maybe could use some city property, or maybe could use some other facilities from the city. I'd like to see a more unified voice on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And a couple of things that you said, Ron, that I was interested in responding to. Was essentially, should we wait for the senior levels of government to respond? And I have to agree with you, absolutely not, because we're quite capable as a community of taking charge ourselves. And if we're really going to make a difference that is important for us, we're the ones who have to make those decisions, not have them imposed on us by some other level of government. They can support it, but we're the ones who are going to have to make the decision. And the other thing, you're talking, and a number of people, I think, have said by most people around the table that essentially, unless we make a change in the way we do things, we're going to end up exactly in the direction that we're headed in, which we need to be making some change. Last night there was another death from an overdose. We've had multiple overdoses since we met before Christmas time. There's been we definitely have lots of social problems and issues of crime, and have not gone away. In fact, probably the opposite has happened. So we want to make some change. That's the whole point in us getting together. That's the whole point in us of us inviting the community into this discussion, is what can we do in order to make a change. So with council's indulgence, CAO is actually prepared to just make some comments on things that have changed since our meeting, our committee of the whole before Christmas, and I thought that maybe this is a good time to get a bit of perspective on that before we try and close out the conversation on the Social Planning Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And prepared might be a bit of an overstatement, but I have reviewed.
It was coerced, is that what you're thinking?
Called upon, how's that? So some actions the city has taken recently. We've worked extensively with other levels of government, and some of the things that you see coming from that are a harm reduction center in the city, a sobering site, and some pending social housing projects that we anticipate and are hopeful that will come our way. And so we're supportive where possible, helping others access funding from senior governments. And I think that's what I hear council saying is, yes, we can step up and have senior government fund projects that we can have a hand in dictating. More directly from the city, we've engaged with the community to identify the needs and explore options. We have a reconciliation committee process underway that is extremely promising. And we recently held a community engagement session that had, I understand, about 120 people there. The room was packed, and it was very successful. We've elevated, our community policing organization has elevated their activity with some street patrols, for lack of a better term. Through our budget process, we've made a considerable enhancement to our bylaw services department, and as we hire to fill those positions that are now funded, we will see a considerable difference in our ability to enforce our own bylaws. We've provided funding for a program that is yet to be developed, but a program that provides subsidies to private property owners to offset some of the costs of securing their buildings. We have a very effective working nuisance building working group, and that is a multi-stakeholder group that is collectively addressing some of our most challenging buildings in the community. Council has designated 4 buildings in the community as nuisances, and those buildings We've seen considerable improvement in those buildings and the way they're managed, and we're continuing to work with those building owners. We're supporting local businesses via the newly activated Uptown Merchants Association. Council is considering changes to our purchasing policy. Those changes include seeking to have more local contractors and supply of materials, and also an aspect of social procurement, so that we can turn our minds to the considerable money that the city spends to getting more than a bottom line best price, but to get other values as well. And council is now discussing and considering a social planning commission. And underlying all of that is the continued work that the city does supporting diversification of the local economy. And Mr. Mayor, I may have missed a number of things. A number of things that the city that is doing and are funded in budget also are tangentially supportive of the things we're talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a lot to do in a relatively short period of time, especially when you have Christmas in the middle of it. Is there anybody else who wishes to address council? I think I saw Ellen Fruit's hand up. And then Mr. Robertson at the back.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. Far be it for me to pass up an opportunity to speak. Imagine that.
Why would you?
Yeah. Well, I just want to, in support of Ron's presentation, the one big thing that jumped out at me is a commission that would bypass this council. It would carry through to other councils, that it would be a philosophy that would be carried through, and a group of people that would be maintaining that with representation, I think, equally from council and from the community. And, you know, we're not talking about gender balance. We're talking about ethno-racial. There's you know, our First Nations people. So there's lots of ways of looking at representation. I feel it's really important for this council to say, yes, we're committed to creating a commission. We already have a social planning committee. It's been in existence for quite some time, of which the Community Stakeholders Initiative to End Homelessness is an arm of. And so, you know, it has created and done some great stuff. So I guess maybe I would just like council to think of it from the perspective that it is something that is going to be socially responsible in terms of looking at the long-term future, and not just end with this council when we get to an election in the fall of this year. And I'm just going to call you to your saying here, which says building a city, and no city should be too large for a man to walk out of it in the morning. And, you know, we have a great city here. I'm a newcomer, but I love it, and it has great hope and potential. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McClement.
Yeah, if I could, Alan, if I could ask you a question, do you see yourself and your group, ACAUS, being able to function and get results from some form of a social planning committee? And if so, do you think it should be bottom up or top down?
So I don't see it in terms of my group in particular. I see it as a bigger social issue. And I see it, again, in terms of a planning commission working on the benefits to the community. I think responsibly, every single one of the nonprofits in this community is responsible for reaching out and working together. And there are many, many models of nonprofit networks in other communities that work to bring volunteers together, which is something you brought up, Councillor. But no, I wouldn't say no. We will always participate and be involved in any collectives that would be for the long-term planning. I mean, we have to look at the big picture. We're only one of many. I don't know if I've answered your question, but.
Thank you. Gary. Mr. Robertson.
Wrong name.
Wrong name, I'm sorry.
Mark Awesome.
Mark, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. We could change your name, but it would, you know, it wouldn't be fair.
The other one could be your committee. There you go. Don't know how many know, but on March 19th, I facilitated a town hall meeting at the Italian Center, and our mayor showed up, and Dan and Dennis, and unfortunately the turnout wasn't quite as high as I had hoped, but in the process of the work up to holding that meeting, I went into 153 businesses personally, handed out information, and the discussion was mostly around crime and economic development, because unfortunately they kind of go hand in hand. And my promise to everybody I spoke to was I would come here and try and get their word out to council. And there was a couple points that were pretty strong amongst everybody. I don't think I went to a single place where somebody didn't have a story of how crime affected them, their family, either through their business or their residence. The second thing is that everybody felt helpless because nobody was doing anything about it. And that's not true, but that's the perception. And part of it comes from our city's reputation right now is pretty bad. And most of that's really not that justified when you compare it to most places, but statistics, news articles, that kind of thing give us a bad name. I was at a conference a little while back sitting with another couple, and they were from Manitoba, and the lady leans over to me and my wife and she says, "How can you guys stand living in Port Alberni?" And they lived in Winnipeg, and I don't know how many people have lived in Winnipeg, but it's no jewel. But that's a reputation that runs across the country of us. And so when I was out talking to people, they have that reputation in their head that they hear it and nobody's doing anything and we're getting worse and worse. And there's almost a sense of helplessness out there with a lot of people. And if I put myself and my opinion in here now, I think the biggest thing that we need is leadership from the city council on how do we change our reputation. And that, we discussed it at the town hall meeting there. What's our brand? What do we call ourselves? Whether it's, about the water, whether it's lumberjacks and bear tracks and all of those things. And I think in the end, none of that is really that important if we're not trying to get to a goal. What does the city want to be when it grows up, for lack of a better term? And I think that what we need is the city, whether it's, and social development is part of that, and economic development is part of it. We need to have a vision of where we want to be in 10, 20, 30 years. And for the city to actually come out and, here's our statement. We want to be the safest city on the island. We want to be the richest city on the island. We want to be the most friendly, something that's positive. And then when every committee, every group that's out there, all the volunteers, we can all work under that banner. So now we are working together, and then people will feel like we're part of something that's actually moving forward. I mean, I applaud the city on the steps we've already taken with bylaw enforcement and the citizens on patrol. Those are all good things, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that because we haven't been banging the drums that the city's got a plan to be great. And it doesn't take a lot of money. A lot of the stuff that I've suggested doesn't take any money. It just takes a vision, creating a statement, and everyone working together. And maybe we put out a flyer and we say we're going to hold 20 block, not Citizens Patrol, the Block Watch program. People ask me about that. How do we start a Block Watch program? Well, nobody knows even where to look. I've offered for all the years I've been in this town, tell people, buy me a coffee. I'll give you as much advice as I can on crime prevention with regard to your business, your home. For everyone who doesn't know, I work in the security industry, so I unfortunately hear almost every time somebody gets broken into, I hear it. For a long time, I worked with Dennis Sauvé there when he was still with the RCMP doing the crime maps and the crime reports, and I get a little pessimistic because I hear about it almost every single day. And there's a lot of things we can do, but I guess the biggest thing is just that hope that actually somebody's trying to do something. And if I look at our current vigilante story that's making the rounds outside of Port Alberni as well, that's that typical feeling of helplessness. People went to the police, they did everything they could, now they got to take it into their own hands. And outside of that exact case, that's all over the place. People tell me I've had so much stuff stolen out of my yard, or diesel stolen out of our equipment, radio stolen out of trucks. Every single day I'm hearing these things, and people say, nobody cares. It's just, I got to pass on that cost to my customers because it's just a cost of doing business in the valley. And that's a shame. And I think that, if I had one wish, it's city can say, let's start our initiative to be the safest city, whatever it is, pick a name. And I know I'll volunteer my time to go out there and pound the pavement and do something. While I was out talking to all these businesses, the number of people asked me to run for council because they thought I was doing something. Well, I said, I'm not running. I've got too many other projects to do. But that's really the voice of all the people that I talked to and the people that showed up at the committee or at that town hall meeting had to say. And that's about it for me.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Councillor Sobey.
Just in response to you, thank you for stepping up and talking, by the way, and thank you for taking the initiative to have a town forum. I think, yes, it wasn't well attended, but, you know, there's still people there with a lot of questions. When it comes to responsibility of a council to set up a motivation, you know, we're policymakers when it comes to our city business. And we provide a vision. We provide, you know, a 5-year plan, and it's something that we've worked together as council, that what we feel as a council is a proper vision for the future of Port Alberni, economic development and all that. And public safety takes a big role in this. The problem that you have in this committee that I see with my experience, a lot of people are very impatient. A lot of people are not very understanding as what is the process in the society we live to get somebody properly, get somebody justice. You know, they expect, it takes investigations, it takes a lot of evidence gathering before they could propose something to Crown Council. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about the whole process, but it takes time. People taking in their own hands, in their own actions, to supervent the process actually is hurting the process. And I want to make sure everybody gets that message, because not only that, then there's a lot of investigating that's been wasting and a lot of evidence being destroyed because it's inadmissible. So vigilante, of course, even though I do understand their anger, any human being would understand the person's anger. It's how you react that's going to make a difference and identify on what kind of society we have. Now, the way we pass our message to council about what's going on when it comes to public safety, it comes through the RCMP. It doesn't necessarily have to come from council. It comes from these departments that deals with these situations. And as you're aware, the RCMP made several statements and so forth. But public safety has always been this council, and we voted on many motions to make sure we continue public safety. So the message is out there. Now, if you want us to put an ad in a flyer and put it in a newspaper that we're proactive and all that, you know, I don't know if we have the time to do that, but if everybody would follow city council and see these motions that we're putting through to facilitate these things. You know, we facilitated things at Uptown Security. I know city staff is working together with the RCMP as we speak in working into these matters. We've supported safe injection sites. You know, we're working close together with many agencies such as the shelter and so forth. So I just want to make sure you understand the message that there is something being done. And it is advertised. It's advertised during our council meetings, and we're truly trying the best. But again, it's a cooperative of a lot of people of working together. And honestly, you're totally right. This town is not as bad as people talk, and I don't know where this information is coming from, because obviously they haven't been in their community. And they witness one crime and they think it's a rampage thing for the town. I get emails to this date of, is it safe for me to send my children to the community school at the Echo Center? It's under belief. Is it safe, seniors getting a hold of me, is it safe to walk downtown? I'm telling you right now, it is safe, absolutely safe. And it's unfortunately social media and the public get it perceptive that, you know, and the old rumors of what kind of town it is. It's not the town that's being portrayed, and it's unfortunate. If they want to get the truth, go to the source. But thank you for coming out tonight.
if I could just respond for a sec. I agree with you, Dennis. The trouble is, and I hate to see it, most people don't put up the effort to follow council meetings and that kind of stuff. So they hear from their friends, from social media, for whatever, what it is. And it's like I tell the kids when I volunteer for at the schools, you have to control your image when you put it online. If you want to get a job, don't put a picture of you partying on there. I think that there is an opportunity, though, for the city council to at least make that statement. We're making a broad policy that this is what we want to do. And whenever it has a chance, just mention that, you know, like I had said a few years back, call it a Safest Cities Initiative. Say we've got a plan over the next 3 or 5 years to become the safest city on the island. And then every time that gets out there, it helps build in the profile on social media, so that when Google's doing its search, it sees, oh, there's 200 things that said safest city. Now when people search us, you know, it's not drug overdoses or whatever that they see first. And they're just little things, and they all could help to turn that tide, because it's really hard to change an impression. I always talk about, I teach sailing and I teach a bunch of things, and the Canadian Yachting Association still asks the question in Vancouver, if you can spell Port Melon, which way is the wind going? Well, you haven't been able to smell Port Melon for a long time, so I hope they can navigate better than that. But decades after the change, people still have that old impression, and so we got to work at it little bits as we can, wherever we can.
But I'm prepared to tell you right now that Port Alberni is a safe community to live in and to raise a family. It's out.
Yeah.
Can we do more? We can, but it's out.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Councillor McClellan, and then Councillor Minions, and then Mr. Anderson has a comment he wants to make.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, you sent me an email a while back, offered to have coffee, and I took off to look at grandkids for a few weeks, a whole lot of weeks. So maybe next week we get together, and appreciate what you're doing. I'm kind of one of those guys that Councillor Sylvia is talking about, get fed up with processes, want to see some results. It just seems everywhere I go, someone's got a process, so we can't do anything. And maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way, but that's just the way I am. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'd also like to thank Mr. Anderson for asking the question I didn't ask, because I thought it was taking too much time. Thank you.
Councillor Minions.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, and I think you make a really good point about us needing to get the message out of what we are doing. And I think it's easy for us to get sort of stuck in a silo that we're in the city and always expect that people know what we're doing because it is public, or people know what we're working on, or people know how to use our processes. And the average person in our community doesn't know. And they get their information from social media or from the newspaper. And I think that's a really important thing for us to all hear and recognize, because I think the time has changed where we can just expect people to come here to get the message. We need to take the messages to them where they want to get it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alamani?
Thank you. Sorry I wasn't able to make it to your event. I think it was with family or something. But I'm glad that you came and reported, because one of the things I remember, I think it was around 2012 or 2013, I heard very much the same kind of sentiment, and it shocked me. You know, it was in a meeting, and someone asked, you know, how would you describe the community? And the place got really quiet, and they said, and someone actually just stood up and said, depressed. And it was quite shocking, and it was quite shocking to the room. I won't forget that. But yes, so I think I've heard the same kind of sentiment. But what I wanted to say was, as far as the commission, I think we have a really good opportunity with this commission, because it's quite broad. You know, we already have the Reconciliation Committee, we have the Food Security Climate Disruption Committee, we have the Alberni, or the Advisory Planning Commission. The Food Security Committee is going through a process of looking at whether it wants to turn itself in, or recommend to council to turn itself into a commission that would be more permanent, and for very much the same kind of reasons that we're hearing from the Social Planning Commission. So I see some really good synergies, and I see opportunity for the city to try to, because right now our commissions are they're very siloed. There's really no discussion or sharing between bodies in the city. I think this is a great opportunity to be able to pick and just be able to have that kind of discussion between our commissions, so that all of that expertise and experience and all of the initiatives that are happening there kind of happen more cohesively. So I think that's going to be a good potential advantage to us as a city if we take the opportunity to actually set up that kind of linkage of systems. That's just something I was thinking about.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Just quickly on Mr. Sovi's comments, I can't agree with all that he said. I mean, I've been up at City Council for over 3 months now, trying to get answers on a situation which I won't discuss tonight. That's for the next episode will happen next Tuesday, or next Monday, I guess. But I don't get straight answers, and I'm not sure that the process that's being described from Councillor Sovi is happening in this case. And the last thing I wanted to mention, if I could ask a question of Mr. Jorgensen, is the guy that walked into the bar and ordered 3 drinks. No, I'm over here.
Remember, there are people listening at home, and it is dinner time.
If I may.
Yep, okay.
Jack, I've been reflecting as I've listened to you speak. And your thoughts are part of the reason that I'm here. Because, like you, I'm very concerned about the fact that we do too much talking about it and we don't do enough action. If something isn't happening, it starts to feel like it's a waste of time. And as I mentioned back in December, I've been to poverty meetings for so long that people talked and it never got to a place of action. So one of the things that I would like to do is that if the council moves forward on a social planning commission, I'd like you to consider being a member of that commission. You sure? Yes, because you will push us to action, and I think the action is important. If it just becomes another committee, another commission that's not doing anything, then I couldn't agree with you more. I'm looking for action out of that group.
I was just about to volunteer.
Okay, Councillor, please come on up. This is a good time. We're going to be wrapping up pretty quickly, so good chance.
I'll be brief. I've got a short memory, so I can't remember everything I want to say.
How about starting with your name?
Marjorie Jarrett.
Welcome, Marjorie.
I just want to say that whether or not, I don't know if I consider myself middle income or not, but I do know that I live in a house, I get in my own car, I get in at the morning after having a good night's sleep in a bed, I've got clean clothes to put on, I've got food in my refrigerator to cook for the day. I know there are a lot of people in this town who have none of those things. We do have very big problems in this town. I'm very much in support of this committee because I think we need the continuity. It may be impossible to envision, but after the next municipal election, there might be some new faces here. You might be starting fresh with a new set of goals. We need somebody to keep this particular initiative going. We need to address the fact that our city does have a lot of people who are in very poor conditions. So I very much hope that you will seriously consider forming this commission. So both the continuity, but also the massive, the enormous power of all the money that's brought in from all the various grants and whatnot, plus all the people power. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just in response, Marjorie, one of the things, this is a committee of the whole, so we won't make decisions tonight, but we can certainly bring them forth to our next meeting. Question? Comment? Welcome, Roman.
Thank you. I had to ask permission to come up first. I am working, but I'll speak as a resident right now. My name is Roman Frank, and I've lived in the valley here for about 10 years, but I've lived in the area my entire life. And I thought this was an interesting discussion that I really want to provide 2 cents, if that 2 cents is worth anything, to from a personal point of view. And I'm sorry that my friend Mark Awesome left, because I wanted to disagree with him in a good way about one thing that matters, and that should always matter as we move forward with this as a viable option or anything we're going to do. Reputation and character. My personal opinion on character and reputation is this. I am not responsible for any of my reputation. Everyone else is. How you choose to see me based on what I do or don't do, it's always going to be your opinion, your perception. What you think of me is up to you. As it goes for Port Alberni, that's what the reputation is as well. Character, that's mine and mine alone. What I have, what I build, what I do with it, that's entirely my responsibility. As we move forward as Port Alberni, we have a lot of great people with a lot of deep character who can bring a lot to this table. And I think what we need to have is an advocate, a clear advocate for what sorts of tools, what sorts of direction, what sorts of energy, and what sorts of resources can be brought into the fold while we build that character into progress. Whether or not we decide to do something, we're going to go somewhere. You've said that plain and clear. But wouldn't it be great to decide this is the direction we're going to go and gather that strength of resource? And yeah, it's going to take time. Yeah, it's going to maybe go beyond my years. But at least we can sleep better at night knowing we decided something based on our character. And the rest of the world will catch on. We don't have to worry about what our reputation is if we're too busy building a better character. And I think if we do that and we have an advocate, an advocacy group, we could do a lot of wonderful things. Because this mayor and council, as good as a job as you're doing, have a limited scope to what you can do. But if you bring someone from the table who has access on the First Nation side, they have their own scope and access. You build someone from another side who has contacts into provincial, federal departments, you start to build facets. And the more facets you have, the more decisions and the more directions you can choose to go in. So I think what we're looking for is a good advocate for the group as a whole. And I think what we're looking for is a better way of seeing the character we always have and build on that. So I just want to leave it at that. I couldn't sit in the back and not thank everyone for what has been done, but also realize it's only the beginning. And I think we got a long ways to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Roman. Councillor Paulson.
Just a couple things. First of all, addressing image. A couple weekends ago, we were able to host 126 characters. And of those 126, over 80 were from families that were from outside of our community. And it's always very interesting to talk to people who haven't been to our community before, but come for 3 or 4 days, and in this particular case, it happened to be an athletic event, but their impression of our community, new high school, college, the multiplex, the waterfront. So it's only dribs and drabs and snippets where we had those 126 people here, but our community, when people come here, usually leave with a pretty positive impression. And I mean, that's not the only event. The second thing is I wanted to just talk about your image on page 3 of your presentation, and that's the drop of water. And as I looked at that, the thing that got me is we, as human beings, get caught here. We dwell on the problem. And what I was encouraged to hear is you're operating out in here. And we can go through this, oh, woe is me, I've got a problem, and those sorts of things. But if we had a commission that was working out in here, dwelling on the solutions and reporting back to council saying, here's how we see the solutions, here how we see how things can be better. If we can get out of this, we get mired in that drop of water. And as far as a commission goes, I don't see any downside to going in that direction, Ron, and I have every confidence that this community can make that work. Dwell on the solution, not the problem.
Okay, Councillor Washington, last word to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to Ron. Loved your presentation, but what do you see yourself, what role do you see yourself in the Social Planning Council? Are you planning to stay on? Are you planning to be the chair? Or are you
There's a social planning council that I belong to.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for is a social planning commission. That would be the ideal, that has that longitudinal aspect to it. I'm going to continue to do the work that I do with people and with groups where I can. If I'm called to serve, I will rise to that to serve. But that's not my goal to.
Okay, thank you. Council, we've had we've had a really good discussion today, and we've had lots of information. We've got some thinking to do before we consider this, the results of this, how we want to respond to this at our next council meeting or an upcoming council meeting. Doesn't have to be the next one, but an upcoming one. So thank you, everybody, for your engagement in our committee of the whole. It was a good meeting, a good session. At this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor?
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.